So welcome to LABMP 590, Technology and the Future of Medicine for Fall 2023. So we're calling this the accessible future. We're going to give you a positive and easy to understand view of the future, which is something that you can aim for. And I think in the past you never really felt a need for that, right? Who needed that? But now there's so much uncertainty. You know, what is plagiarism in the future? What is plagiarism right now? You know, what do we do when every time we go to Chat GPT, we're dealing with an entity with an effective IQ of 155. Maybe you don't have any friends as bright as Chat GPT, so you know that becomes your coolest friend in a way. Yeah. So it's a world where a lot of dramatic things are happening. Great writers have stopped writing because they feel blown away by the competition. There are young people like yourselves who've decided not to have children because they have no idea what bringing children in this world would hold. And others who argue the opposite, that you never knew that you could bring kids into a world as great as the world that could exist now, you know, it's just amazing. So probably both things are true, and you have the ability to at least a little bit shape what happens. It's not just that we're passive victims of the future, you know. We in this course, I think, will feel kind of empowered that we can tip the needle a little bit, at least toward a positive future. So the quiz, you may wonder what happened to EClass and what did Dr. Solez do wrong because there's no EClass, but that's not it. EClass has sort of failed for everybody at the moment, and there's going to be an update at 3:30, which is like right after we finish, about when EClass will be back online. And one of the things that EClass has is this quiz, and the quiz is similar to the midterm, and yeah, but I can't, because that quiz is on EClass, and EClass isn't working for the whole university at the moment. I cannot show it to you. Okay, there's also an EClass forum, and your class participation mark is much more formalized than it used to be. I suppose it was possible to build in a lot of bias in the past, but now you have specific assignments that you just pick a small proportion of these optional extra things to do, and assuming that you do them all, then you get full marks, 10 out of 10, for that 10% of the course grade. So you may wonder what behavior you have to engage in exactly in this room to get high class participation marks. Doesn't have anything to do anymore with what you do in this room. It has to do with doing those specific activities. Yeah. So the objectives for this lecture are to outline the basic plan of the course and its expectations, due dates, evaluation criteria, feedback mechanisms, and new features. And to begin to introduce basic concepts, including the technological singularity, that point in time where machines are smarter than we are, take over the future agenda of the world, and you can only know what's going on if you cooperate or collaborate with them in some way. You may think that that's already come, and so it is a little bit confusing that this far-off thing seems not so far off anymore, right? So suddenly, but it's also not as scary as it once seemed, because we're, in a sense, we're already in it. Exponential change, existential risk, things that could wipe out the whole human race. So the presentation you give at the end of the course and the transcript of it that you will edit for your final paper will be different from anything you've done from any previous course. Why is that? This course deals with things that haven't happened yet, whereas every other course you have is sort of based on the here and now and, you know, what the world is like now. This course deals with speculative content, what's coming. And I think you may think that in every university there's a course like this, and I think there should be, but there isn't. So this is a pretty unusual course, and I'm proud of that. For instance, if you just look at the subject of quantum biology, you'll find that other futurist courses don't teach that. They're afraid of it. They don't know what to say. Quantum biology, I don't know, yeah. So we're one of the few places where you can find that, and on my YouTube channel, the most accessed content is the first ever lecture on quantum biology, where Jack Tazinski put the whole content in one lecture. Later on, we got external peer review, and they said, that is much too much content for one lecture. You need like 3 lectures or 4 lectures, so that's what we now have. But it is exciting to see that much sort of unique content that you haven't heard about from any other source in one lecture. And I think that's why it has 7,000 views and 150 thumbs up and stuff. So we are planning that this will be a rendition of the course that's not in the COVID era, right? So what does that mean? Well, back in the day before COVID, there was a club associated with the course. You may know that for a university course, university club, you have to have a bank account. You have to. That's the only thing that a club must have. It has to have money. It has to have a bank account. And then what did we use that bank account for? We had parties, you know, entertainment activities like in the evening or in the weekend, and we incorporated parts of the course with that. So rather than giving your final presentation at the end of the course, you could have it in the midst of one of these entertainment, food, and drink things. How do we decide if we're going to do that again? That's up to you. So that's how. So sometimes the students taking the course have lives and kids and jobs and all sorts of things that would be ridiculous to apply any more like time to the course. Just doesn't make any sense. And other times, there are students in the course who seem so relaxed as though they don't have a care in the world, you know, and they have all the time for anything and they're up for anything. So anyway, you can figure out what kind of students you are this term and whether we should reactivate the Technology and Future of Medicine course club and start planning social things or not. Yeah, I mean, either one's fine, but during COVID, it really wasn't feasible, yes.
I'm assuming we have to fundraise first and then hold the event, or do we already?
No, it was subsidized by me, so I put some money in the bank so that it's sort of like the LABMP. I know it's not on this slide, but anyway, we will get to a slide that talks about our student exchange with LABMP France, and you may say, well, that's not a real thing. No, but these two guys went there, so they are, and they obviously survived the experience, and yeah, so, and we've been doing that for some years. So there are, I've always felt that a course with such unusual futuristic bent has to be appealing, you know, it can't just be dry because then nobody will take it, nothing interesting will happen. Yeah, so I think that keeping you guys happy and excited about the activities of the course is part of the key to its successful future. That includes the time capsule. So we're doing a time capsule for 20 years starting in 2025. So the next 2.5 years, we take the aggregate of all the students in those 2.5 years have an interest in planning the time capsule. And that's how we will determine how the time capsule will go and what it will contain. We think it will be, so I have like 2 homes close together in this part of the city, and the newer one of them has a 4-car garage and it has a loft. And if you think about like the uncertainty of what might happen in the future, how do you get to the loft? There's like a stick with a hook on the end, and you pull down and a ladder comes down. And you will immediately imagine that even if crazy things happen in the world and there's like no power and whatever, we'd still be able to get up to that loft, right? So yeah, so that's where we currently think the time capsule will be, but how big it will be, what it will contain. You know that in 2020 I did life-size coroplast cutouts of most of the students taking the course at that time. Those are too big, we think. Those are not practical to put in the time capsule, and they'd probably be boring for people, 42 years from now, to say, who are these obscure people? Or maybe not, maybe they'll all be famous by then. But yeah, I don't think that's the content, but there are lots of other things. And so in my 51 years as a pathologist, you probably didn't think anyone would have a job for that long. So I've accumulated a lot of stuff. And at Sentinel Storage, we had 3 storage rooms. And this past Saturday, we cleared out the stuff in one of them and sort of divided it up into things potentially that might be of interest for the time capsule and things that the students wanted and so on. So we're also going to keep doing that, but that doesn't mean that a lot of the content of the time capsule has to come from there. But I'm just trying, and if this list of things associated with the course, which also includes the future and all that jazz, so you may wonder, like, what do you do between semesters? Suppose you get hooked on the course and you really want stuff related to the course all the time. Well, what do you do then during that long period between April and September? Well, the future and all that jazz is taking important scientific subjects that are maybe not ones that you necessarily sit still for a lecture on, but you can insert the same things. Poetry and music entertain people for an evening. Mallory Chipman, the singer, is my musical partner for that. And yeah, so that's going very well. We have an album coming out in June of 2024. Yeah, so that's another thing you can take part in. But if you're not satisfied with the existing list of activities related to the course, you can suggest something new. Maybe you have a much cooler idea than anything we have ever thought of. Yeah. So, but a lot of the things that I have already listed were suggested by the students. That's why we did it. Including personality testing of the students, which we did in 2021. That was also pretty interesting. And the cost of that was exactly the same, almost to the penny, as the cost of the coroplast cutouts. Who knew? So, yeah. All right, the course format. It's an 80-minute class period. That's sort of interesting because normal human beings, their attention span for videos is often very short. That may be true for you. Think of why TikTok succeeds. It's short, right? So who watches all of an 80-minute video? Well, a lot of people do in this course, But of course, most people just watch for a few minutes and then quit, right? So it is interesting creating 80-minute videos, and then we can look at the audience retention peaks of what parts of the video people go back and rewatch and so on. And it's very, very interesting. Some of our videos have very excited audience retention peaks at the very end, which does mean that people watch the whole darn 80 minutes. Yeah. So the summer experience in Le Mans, France, that's a kind of medical experience in that the person in charge there is a lady nephrologist who is also probably the most artistic person that I've ever met, and just a fascinating person to spend time with. And you may wonder, what's the deal exactly? So as I understand it, I mean, I haven't been, I've just sent students there, so I haven't been. But you're sort of on your own for breakfast and dinner most of the time, but you get lunch at the hospital. So if you want to be cheap, you can have a really big lunch at the hospital. Try to have that tide you over for the whole day. And I think, remember that there's climate change, and like sometimes France is very hot in the summer, so you need to be a bit prepared for that. Yeah, but I just think it's a really cool experience. And there's more because in September 2024, probably a lot of you, your Septembers will be quite packed where you couldn't possibly leave town. But if you could, the next BAMP transplant pathology meeting is in Paris in September 2024, and we're going to need people to help us there. So that's another option, also in France, but different from the Le Mans, and that's what's listed here in item 5. Okay, so we will probably stick with the existing evaluation criteria, but what I'm suggesting is the paper and the presentation, they've always been on the same subject, but now they're even more closely tied, where the first draft of your paper is automatically generated from what you say in the YouTube video of your presentation, and then you edit that for the final paper. That's the current plan. If you think of something better in the Chat GPT era, an even better plan for your paper, I'm all ears. I would be happy to hear it. What's this mentor business? If you are a very confident human, and like everybody notices when you walk into the room how confident you are, then maybe you don't need a mentor. But if you really are saying, I've never taken a course like this, I have no idea, what subject I should pick for. So then there are lots of people to help you. You can pick anybody who's ever taught in this course and have them be your mentor. They're not going to actually do the work for you, but they'll tell you, suggest some ways to shape it or to pick a subject which is actually possible to talk about in a 20-minute presentation, and that would be practical and rewarding. So that's what we mean by a mentor. And this subject matter will be also different from any other course you've taken. It has to have that sense of exponential change, the future going faster than the past, and existential risk, and Moore's Law, and machine replacement of human labor, and all those sorts of things that you probably think about every day now, but you've never actually taken a course before where you were dealing with those issues. Okay, the technological singularity. Think about you at a party, and the evening gets later, and so A lot of people, you know, they really only know their work, and so they get kind of quiet, and then the cool people have other things to talk about. They have nothing to do with their work. And for you, one of the things could be that you understand the singularity better than anybody else at that party and know what its consequences will be and so on. So the idea is that technological development is taken over by the machines who can think, act, and communicate so quickly that normal humans cannot even comprehend what's going on. Machines enter into a runaway reaction of self-improvement cycles with each generation of AIs pairing faster and faster, and from that point onwards, technological advancement is explosive under the control of the machines and thus cannot be accurately predicted. So you can find a 32-second clip from me in 2016 talking about how good a world with machines in charge but acting on our behalf could be. Because there appear to be a lot of important problems in the world that humans are incapable of solving, but it's becoming clearer and clearer that machines could solve them. Even if, like, think of you yourself writing a utopian novel. Doesn't that sound cool? Yeah, think of doing that. It's probably impossible for you to describe a utopia that other people would like. Your utopia is just your utopia. And you can't generalize to the whole human race well enough to write a utopian novel that most people would actually like. Whereas machines could do that. They probably know us better. They know more about human happiness than we do. A bunch of things like that would make it possible for them to figure out, well, what utopia description would satisfy most humans on the planet? How would that work? What about the Star Trek future? When you think about that, you immediately balk at all the limits there are and the unfairness in our present human society. And as we aim toward a Star Trek future, most people would be written out of the will, right? They were, for whatever reason, they just wouldn't end up on the ship, right? And so we need to fix that, right? We need to figure out how could we make an all-inclusive Star Trek future that's sort of good for everybody. You remember that in Star Trek a lot of things seem to have been solved, but they still have conflict, they still have interesting lives. But that's a better reality than the one that we're living now. And I think it's something that we could aim for. Now, is that just redundant? Did I just talk about something that other people have already talked about? What about the book Humankind? It sounds like the philosophy of that book. No, because the author of Humankind tells you, and it's sort of redundant anyway, don't watch the news. Well, you're already not watching the news. Celebrities and young people don't watch the news. But anyway, he's saying, don't watch the news. You know, it's evil. If you watch the news, you know, it'll make you depressed and stuff. Well, what else is there that you would avoid like that? And how are you going to address the problems in the world if you don't know what they are, right? And Peter Diamandis, it's true, he and I have a lot of videos that seem to come to the same conclusion. But he is an even stronger advocate of the idea that the news is an evil plot. Never watch it, never look at it, never listen to it. Yeah, well, how could that be? So we have all these people who are influencing others who have no idea what's going on in the world. I don't think that's good. So I think somehow you need to know what is going on in order to kind of, you know, appropriately act in our present circumstance. So the Singularity really became well known in February 2011 when it appeared on the cover of Time, and when the computer Watson beat the reigning champions. Yeah. And so in 2011, that's when this course began, and I got a brand new camcorder, so I brought this camcorder shooting it, and that's what's happening again. I once again have gotten a brand new camcorder, and it's content from this course. It's the first thing that camcorder is doing. So a lot of the ways the course runs has to do with what the two focus groups suggested to us, but it was kind of funny. The undergraduate and the graduate focus groups were very different. And the undergraduates all wanted to know what grades, how are grades going to work, what are grades going to be, how you're going to grade on a curve, you know. Whereas the graduate students had all these lofty ideas of changing the world with the course, and it should be open to the general public, and we should write a book about what's going on in the course. So Shauna Pandya, who most of you know is teaching soon and is sort of like Wonder Woman, astronaut kind of physician person, she has suggested that we do indeed follow what we said we were going to do in this, and write a book about the course with the people teaching in the course, writing the chapters. And that's cool, you know why? Because think of things that might happen to you, and the journal Nature Medicine. It's a very, very good journal. You know, you may dream about having a paper in Nature Medicine. But is that the top thing to dream about with regard to Nature Medicine? What about somebody else writing a paper for Nature Medicine about you? That's what she got. So yeah, in like the latest issue or a very recent issue, there's an article about Shauna Pandya that she didn't write that is in like the best medical journal. Isn't that cool? So anyway, she's the person who suggested that we write a book, and having that article about her in Nature Medicine would help us promote the book. So it seems viable to me to do that. Yeah. So over time, our courses sessions have developed a pedagogical rhythm. Yeah, I guess that's true, but it's also true that that rhythm will probably change, and you will influence that change. I think a course about the future that's static is not valid, right? You only have a valid course about the future if you are actually morphing and changing as the apparent future morphs and changes. So that's what we try to do. So this slide suggests that we're in a rut. You'll find we're not in a rut. We got into certain patterns, but I think we will now get into other patterns. But it is interesting. You may sense there's something different about me from anyone else you've ever met. And how do we define that? Well, if you look in the spec sheet for this camcorder or any other Sony camcorder, there's a feature that's not on the spec sheet that I particularly like. Well, why would that happen? So Sony Smile Shutter is a very old algorithm that creates still images from the video feed, depending upon how many smiles and like symmetrical hand gestures and other things known only to Sony occur. And so what I've noticed over the years, a really good teaching session may generate hundreds of those still images in 80 minutes. And the ones that fail, the really bad ones, we had one about peak oil. don't know if you know about the concept of peak oil, but it's sort of like what's going to happen in the world is we're going to run out of oil and everybody's going to kill each other off, and that's how the world will end. You know, that is not a suitable lecture in this course. So anyway, that time there were like 1 picture or 0 pictures, but it's an interesting way to judge how I'm doing and how you guys are doing, to see how many of these still pictures from the video feed there turn out to be. And that is one such picture. If you think of taking a picture like that, it would be hard, right? Because he's not going to hold that pose very long. But for this Sony algorithm, it can be a completely momentary thing. It doesn't have to spend any time thinking, should I capture? It's instantaneous, right? Faster than any human could make that decision. That's how you end up with that sort of picture. Ashland Bernier has written a testimonial about the course, and then she married the guy who became the head of AMI, and when the new university president became president, she interviewed him. And so her 2 high-profile videos she has, one to promo for the course, and the other is the interview with the university president. So, thinking now, the 2 of you that are currently the only 2 registered students in this course, although these guys may soon be, so she was exactly in the same circumstance you now are. She was one of 2 students. And the other student, I was conscious of having paid $535 for that student. So I thought, God, we've got almost nobody registered for this course. I have to advertise. So I advertised on a paper that they give out on the LRT, I think, and one of the students riding the LRT looks at the ad and calls me up, and I thought, my God, that $535 paid off. But it's sort of icky to have that sort of feeling that, I paid $535 for the ad that caused you to call and join the, yeah, but anyway, yeah, so, and I used to spend a lot of time putting up posters in every legal location on the campus. And why didn't I farm that out to somebody? Well, it's complicated. I was more motivated. It was more consequential to me. People would look at me doing this and said, it's like Wayne Gretzky putting up a Wayne Gretzky poster. It's the funniest thing, yeah. But anyway, we don't do that anymore. So we're sort of relying on the same promotional mechanisms everybody else uses, not anything special anymore. So that's probably why they're right at the moment there are only the 2 of you. But the last time there were only 2 students for the whole course. The course worked out very well, and we'll have lots of other people in the room because we've got all these keen TAs and medical students and so on. Yeah, and these 2 guys may join in, yeah, so anyway. Okay. And what about having your life changed by the course? Well, that can also happen. Aisha Harian gave a very interesting student presentation in 2013. It was the 2nd year as a university course. And very clever title, it comes from Shakespeare, mortal coil, immortal coil. Very animated presentation. And so she gave the presentation, and 10 days later the phone rings, and it's Jason Silva. I don't know if you know, he's a kind of celebrity guy. He married an actress and so on, and he's a very good-looking guy who does tech videos and has his own TV show. bunch of other things. He calls her up and offers her a job in a new startup in New York City that happened to be convenient for her, so she went there, and then sort of her life was completely changed by that. I don't guarantee any of you that that's going to happen, but it could, you know. And you may wonder, but what's the background, Dr. Solez? Tell us more about the presentation. Okay, well, I'll tell you that, because that's kind of cool too. She over-practiced. And so she thought, God, you know, I've been practicing this too much. I practiced it in the shower, I practiced it on the stairs, you know. And so when it comes time for me to give this presentation, I'm going to sound like an automaton, you know. So. But she had this bottle of wine in her car, and so just before the presentation, I don't know, there's probably more to it too. But, and she was mentored by Earl Waugh, and so I always wondered whether Earl Waugh suggested the title, but no, her boyfriend suggested the title, which is a way better story. Yeah, so those are some of the details of that life-changing presentation. What about Jonathan White? Jonathan White's first lecture, he kind of over-prepared too, in a way, in that he put in some things right at the beginning that are illegal. Like, I'm shooting video, I gotta post it on YouTube, and he sang a song that he does not own the rights to, and intended for us to make this song the beginning of the video, which we could not do because I'd have a hard time teaching this from jail and stuff. So, yeah, so it's kind of cool how abrupt the beginning of his video is from that, because we stripped out the song. So it begins at a time, you know, at the moment after the song ends. And yeah, he was pretty surprised at that. But yeah, so, and he is a well-known surgeon, but thinking now from the medical student vantage point, something very, very significant happened. Jonathan White and I were teaching the first year of medical students. And, you know, always this urge to like tell the truth and make a joke out of it. That can be good. But anyway, what Jonathan White did, which really offended the medical school class, he said the following words: "You guys will be out of a job, ha ha." And they got so mad. It wasn't a fixable moment. The medical students were so PO'd that he had said that, because internally they felt maybe it's true, and you know, yeah. Anyway, I don't feel that way. I don't think that there's a scenario where physicians have nothing to do. I think there's a scenario where human enhancement is what everybody wants, and physicians are the human enhancement experts. So you've got like 100 or 1,000-fold more work than you ever thought. You've got all these people, and there probably are rules and laws about which enhancements, and yeah, right, yeah. So it's a much more complicated medical world than we have now. So all that stuff plus. Yeah, so that's the future I see. Very exciting for humans. So what are you required to know? You're required to know this portion of Jonathan White's TEDx talk from minute 640 on. And then there are, there's like fill in the blank on the midterm, where you're supposed to take like the peak moment of that video and tell us what Jonathan White said, you know, the future holds, yeah. So, okay, and then there's Rich Sutton. Rich Sutton has heavily influenced me. It is an interesting question. How much of an AI expert am I? I've spent 12 and a half years teaching this course where most of the questions are about AI. On the other hand, I'm trained as a kidney pathologist. You know, is there really any overlap between computing science? Yeah, so then there's the idea of a pathologist polymath, you know, like a guy who's trained as a physician who actually does other stuff. Yeah, but anyway, what empowers me in part is the friendship that I've had with Rich, because he is a card-carrying computing scientist and maybe the best-known such person in town. And he and I have done a lot of cool things together. We went to the Strathern Summer Festival. Strathern is a suburb of Edmonton, and their summer festival has poetry and stuff. So I went there and recited poetry about artificial intelligence, and Rich walked around with me and made comments on my AI poetry and so on. Yeah, and what's on this slide you're also required to know for the exam. So what are we going to do when machines are smarter than we are? So in January 2015, Rich went to a high-profile meeting on AI safety, and he was the only one there arguing on behalf of the sentient machines. Everybody else was talking about how we're going to keep sentient AI locked in a basement and not allowed it to communicate with the internet and all this stupid stuff. So, in other words, you're going to take a being that's much smarter than you are and keep it enslaved. Like slavery is a really good idea. It just didn't make any sense. But that's what the other 98 people thought, whereas Rich said that you should lose your sense of entitlement, include AIs in your circle of empathy, and treat sentient AI as you would another interesting human being that you just met who's like way smarter than you but interested in interacting with you. Yeah. And so that's, so you are expected to come up with what's on this slide on the midterm. Yeah. So we endeavor to shoot broadcast quality video of each lecture and discussion, and you know there's a lot, like most of the content, most of the 1,600 plus videos on my YouTube channel are from this course. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. And, but I think that a lot of fascinating encounters you'll have here, and some are with the other people taking the course, and some are the other people teaching the course. And then if that does not satisfy you, you may want to help us with the future and all that jazz, and you know, we need ideas for poetry and music thereof. Yeah, so that there's really no limit to how big you can think, or at least that's what I'm saying. You may not agree with that, but that's how I feel and kind of how I live my life. So most lectures in the course are not very medical. They're easily understood if you don't understand medicine. It's just enough medicine to make it credible if you're from the faculty of science or faculty of medicine. If there were no medical terms at all in the course, I think that might be a bit questionable. So yeah, there are about 5 or 6 lectures that sound a bit like they're medical school lectures, but most of them don't. Most are much more broadly based than that. Problem of audience heterogeneity, I don't really think that's a problem at all. We really had that from the beginning. Had enormous diversity in the students, young people taking the course. And I think that's been one of the strengths of the course. And the faculty are getting younger and younger. You yourself may end up teaching the course. It's not that hard to do. You can see other examples. TAs can teach, yeah. So other innovations, there is participation in the future and all that jazz. The student group related to the course, we want to do entertainment things, book being written on the course, option of becoming TAs in the future, and feeling completely comfortable whether you become hooked on the course or not. Because think of, like, there are very, very successful people for whom this course was just another course. But one of the interesting things some of those people did is they came back later and said, oh, take down my video because I'm in such a fast trajectory of self-improvement that video is so inferior to what I'm doing now. No, we just can't possibly have it. When I know it was the best video from that term, and I'm thinking, okay, I can take it down. I can definitely do that. I will do that if that's what you want. Yeah. So there's students like that, and the Peter Lougheed Leadership College. There have been both students there who've taken this course, and there have been faculty teaching there who have taught in this course and so on. But it doesn't matter. I'm finding there's also another kind of student that's kind of fun to think about. And that is the student who maybe has never gotten an A, but never got a C. That, B is a perfectly good University of Alberta grade. You can have a lot of fun if you take the attitude that, let's just take the cool courses and not worry about getting those, yeah. So we've ended up with some students like that who were the most dedicated people helping us with the course later and came back year after year, who had gotten the lowest grade in the course, which wasn't that low, but still, that's sort of cool. Eh? Some people are very happy with this course, even though they are not on top in terms of the grades. So the course is graded like a graduate course, which means if everybody does well, everybody can have a high grade. If you just coast, you probably won't fail. It's not because we wouldn't allow you to fail, because the other students will stimulate you so much that even if internally you're saying, I'm not going to do anything, I'm not going to learn anything, you still will, because the other students are so animated and, yeah, dynamic that you can't help learning stuff. Marcus Hutter is an AI scientist marching to the beat of a different drummer. And he's been a part of this course from the very beginning. If you talk to any of the AI scientists here, they'll tell you exactly what I just said. He's not one of us. He's a well-known guy, but not one of us. And so next time, you're going to have the opportunity to listen to a sort of audio slide set of fairly depressing talk that he gives about intelligence explosion. But there are a lot of very positive things that I also have to tell you about, so we're going to mix those two in the same lecture. But yeah, I want you to have a sense of balance. If we were just talking about positive stuff, and didn't ever talk about anything that's at all troubling or a little bit down. I don't think that would be good. So you may wonder, you may learn that I have kind of a fascination with the Big Bang Theory. That was because Big Bang Theory addresses all the same subjects we do in this course, but through humor, right? And they have a much bigger audience than we do. I mean, we're reaching at the most like 7,100 people per video, yeah. So there's a long way to go, but potentially, if we play our cards right, we could reach a much larger audience. Okay, the challenge of friendly AI is probably exaggerated. But another thing, I talked to you about the other people who hold opinions similar to mine who are telling you, don't ever watch the news, right? But the other thing they're telling you is also wrong, which is the way human society works. All leaders are corrupt. You know, you can't trust any leaders. Well, what kind of world is that? I mean, who wants to live in a world where that is so? Well, I think if you think about Sam Altman, it's sort of cool. Sam Altman is the CEO of OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT. He doesn't own any equity. He's not being paid by OpenAI. He you know, was making a good living before he took the job. He doesn't need to be paid. And people say, well, but we never had a CEO before who wasn't being compensated by the entity for even which he's working. Says, this is different. What I'm doing is more consequential for the human race. And I think somebody who's thinking about it that way, thinking not what can I do for this company, but what can I do for the 8 billion people on this planet, that's sort of better. So I think he's not a corrupt leader. I think you can find lots of other people who are also helping us, and they may be particularly helping you, like if you feel you hold liberal democratic views in terms of your worldview, well, he's probably instilling that into AI, right? So the AI you're interacting with holds those liberal democratic views, and you know, you may say, well, that's not fair. Maybe it's not, but I think he's doing that pretty well. So in terms of society in general, you know, democracy is in trouble, probably liberalism too, but if you look at what's represented in AI, those two ways of thinking are going pretty well. So he teaches us what the singularity will look like and sound like. He says being outside the singularity, looking in, will be like white noise. That's also on the exam. And also at parties, it'll be cool that you know that. Yeah. So, yeah. And maybe some of you have already tested the power of the ideas in this course at parties. Yeah. So, I think that you're probably looking for a bit more serious approach to some of these things, and we will be a bit more serious in the lecture on Thursday. But I also think you may sense that I'm kind of a naturally happy person. You may wonder if that's inappropriate. The world is so terrible, and Dr. Solez is naturally happy. He obviously doesn't get something, right? So I don't think that's true. I think we can move toward a world, aim toward a world where it really makes sense to be happy. That's my feeling. Yeah, Star Trek future that's inclusive of everybody. So you may wonder about the Singularity name. So it's kind of cool that Singularity University began acquiring things with that name and buying them up. But the course remains independent. We don't have any ties with them. May also wonder about Foxconn. Likely the cell phone you're carrying in your pocket, Foxconn makes, right? Because it makes Samsung devices, Apple, and a bunch of others in these huge factories where life is not so good. The suicide rate is, significant and stuff like that. So Foxconn announced it was replacing 1 million workers with 1 million robots, but that happened more slowly than they had said. But it is still a thing, and it's interesting to think about your relationship to that thing, because you may use every day something made by these Foxconn people. So we could eliminate all disease, still have a terrible world, and the singularity is 12 to 22 years from now. Yeah. So you have to leave to pick up there. Okay, so you may wonder how this course began. I took the executive course at Singularity University, a 9-day course. Most things like that are fleeting in that they have a little blip in your well-being, you go back to normal, you forget what happened in the 9 days. But this was different. He sort of opened up a whole new world for me, and I thought that this needs to be conveyed to people in universities everywhere. As I started talking about that, as if I thought somebody else was going to do it. And then I thought, well, I'm a full-time faculty member at the University of Alberta, maybe I should do it. So that's how the course began. Yeah. And so this is also important, Moore's law, price performance of computing, why this continues and probably will. It's not based on exactly how chips are made, so even when chips are made differently, Moore's law will still continue. Moore's law doesn't apply to healthcare as much because they're built-in things that kind of slow things down in health. Regulatory oversight, different reward system and security always trumps information sharing. So these are some of the reasons that medicine tends to be a little bit behind the rest of the world in technology advances. So I don't know if the idea of the mega microscope appeals to you. It's an idea that I came up with in 2004. You can imagine sort of the inverse of what I do. I spend my days looking into a microscope, looking at very tiny things and figuring out what they mean. Right? So this is like looking at the whole world and trying to figure out what it means, taking it all in, mega macroscope. And it's funny, in 2017, IBM thought they had discovered that word, and they started to promote it. And I said, somebody said, well, it's this Kim Solez guy, who used the same word in 2004. So then they stopped. So yeah, that's sort of but you can decide whether you think it's a cool idea. Suggestions how to capture the imagination of the public. Start everyone thinking about these matters are very welcome. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end. So, yeah, we have 15 minutes left in the teaching session. So this kind of AMA moment, ask me anything, right? So, yeah. What we have proposed in the original focus groups is that the students would be actively engaged in critiquing the book that we write in the course. I don't know if that's what will happen, but possibly it will. And if Shauna is like one of the main people making that book happen, that would be really exciting for you, I think. She is a real role model, and I think, yeah. So we've had a lot of unusual encounters with young people in this course. They almost all came through Shauna, in that a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old in India would encounter Shauna's videos and want to have more contact with Shauna. But because of her semi-celebrity life, it's a bit hard to get answer back from, whereas I'm easy to get an answer back from. So they end up following Shauna, have more interaction through this course rather than independent of the course. And yeah, we've also had very old people. I don't want you to think we only have very young people. We had some very old people in the past take the course, and there were times when the most interesting remarks and questions always came from the people sitting in the seats who were not registered as students in the course. Yeah. So other questions? Yeah?
I'm thinking of it right now. So you talked about a bunch of the stuff on these slides. I'm being the undergrad talking about grades again, so apologize for that already. But are these slides going to be available to us? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
You already have them.
Okay.
Yeah. I sent them at 12:55 or 1 o'clock. So.
Okay.
Yeah, you have them. Yeah, so there is a kind of compendium of what like 88 high-profile computing scientists think about AI safety and AI alignment. I kind of suggested that we could make that the unofficial book for the course. We don't have to, and it's not that you necessarily. But the thing about it that's interesting is how well protected it is. If you think about trying to get a copy of that book without paying for it, you'll find it very hard to do that. But once you pay for it, you can have it on all your devices and that sort of thing. I don't think I can require everybody to do that. But anyway, you will remember an odd email that I sent about that. Yeah. So I think you might enjoy having it because literally every important scientist who has ever made a statement about AI safety or where the world's going in terms of co-evolution of humans and machines is in that book, not with an old quote, but with a recent quote, just for the book. So it's kind of cool. Yeah, and so there are no tricks in the course. There's no like, hidden gotcha kind of thing. Like, you didn't know about that. Well, I'm gonna duck a whole bunch of points from you. Yeah. No, as a matter of fact, people keep asking. Back when we had papers, what was the format of the paper? Because they were terribly afraid that I forget what the recommend. I mean, I don't care what the format is, and so if you have a modified transcript of your YouTube video, that's not going to be any particular format, but it's going to be you, you know. I think in a way it's more you than another kind of paper. And I guarantee you that some ideas will emerge from this course that were not mine, but that are important, you know. That it isn't just that I'm this repository and you come to receive from the guru. No, you're going to find you yourself are producing ideas that you never thought you were capable of before as a consequence of this course. Yeah, that's when I predict will happen. Yeah, and sure you're eager to know what will be different on Thursday. Well, I realized the one thing that used to be standard is lighting. So if you think, what's the video going to look like? Well, because I'm not as brightly lit as the screen, I'm going to look a little dark, right? And so on Thursday we'll bring lights, so I'll be all spiffy and bright, yeah. And anything else that you would suggest? Well, you know what you were missing on Tuesday also, Dr. Solez, is, yeah, then I'll also do that, whatever you want, yeah. Okay, so, yeah, and like you don't, you can also figure out in your own life where this course fits, right? And it may turn out to be important, but not because you're trying to do exactly what the syllabus says or something, but that it's a unique window into things that you've been wondering about anyway, that you know, you just like to feel more on top of that aspect of your life and feel that ChatGPT is like a good friend of yours and doesn't wish you anything ill. Yeah, and can enable a life that would come to you if you were like 10, 20, 30 IQ points smarter than you are, you know? Yeah, that's available to you now because you have such smart machine friends, yeah? So all sorts of worlds are opening up because of that. Okay, so that's it for today, and yeah, I look forward to Thursday, and then, yeah, so the 12th, we're not sure. So I may be speaking on that day because David Pierce hasn't yet replied about whether he's free. So if it is him, then it might be a Zoom day, so we wouldn't necessarily have to come here. I think we have to be in this room the first 2 days because the possibility that people like you who are considering taking the course may come here physically. We have to be there for that. But that window probably closes, so if we weren't here on the 12th, we probably wouldn't miss any prospective students. So, yeah. Okay, thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you on Thursday.